Hello and welcome to Fans of Fandom. I am your host, Dr. Eric Wesselmann, psychologist, fan, and full-time nerd. On this show, we have deep dive conversations about things we're fans of. Today, we have a special edition, one-shot conversation with my friend, colleague, and childhood best friend somewhere out there in the multiverse, Mr. Victor Dandridge.
I love
Victor,
that.
please tell you. Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. That was so good. You're absolutely right though. Somewhere in the multiverse, we are besties and have been forever. That is just perfect. It works perfectly. It works perfectly. But hello everyone. How we doing today? I'm Victor Dandridge, lovingly called the hardest working man in comics, phenomenological narratologist, writer, self-publisher through Vantage and House Productions.
So for this episode, Victor and I are going to focus on the social and psychological importance of fan spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Something that both of us have thought a lot about and approached from different angles. So we're going to see where we converge and see what fun comes out of this. So just starting generally, Victor, what are some of the fan spaces you typically inhabit?
So that's a very important sort of launch point for this conversation because what I inhabit now is different than what I inhabited over the years, right? My
Mm.
typical fan spaces that you'll find me are in social media spaces. That's definitely one.
Mhm.
So in a virtual, non-tangible space, you can see me doing videos, audio podcasts, things like that. I live in that space. Obviously, a relatively new space within the last 20 years, we'll say, of geeky oriented fan spaces. You also find me at comic conventions, which again have also changed a lot over the last 20 years, where they were, for the most part, very in crowd group settings, where now it's a little bit more open pop cultural. So there's going to be more people involved as a generalized whole. But when I started, things were very, very focused on you were of a geek culture nerddom to go to those spaces versus now. I think those are the two largest that I regularly inhabit. Unfortunately, I just lost my home comic shop, which was Comic Town, where I would go every week to record again on social media a comic book review show, and definitely met people, friends, fans, con family people that kind of became very important to me. And so I would say those three are like the key elements of basically what my fan space inhabitancy has been over the last few years.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack and a lot that I also resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
So just some of the things that I noticed that you talked about there. You have sort of the physical
Mm-hmm.
interaction spaces, that traditional face to face that humans have evolved with, since
Right.
time immemorial. Local and broader, right?
Absolutely.
But then there's also the virtual space, which is a
Mm-hmm.
new, relatively new type of platform
Mm-hmm.
for fans to interact, and we'll put a pin in that too,
Mm-hmm.
because for me, you know, I nerd out on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of fans, including being fans of fandom.
Right.
I just fan out on lots of things. Um, and growing up, comics was a big thing, video
Mm-hmm.
games, things like that. We had a local comic shop, or sort of two. One that was in our supermarket, so it was
Mm-hmm.
kind of more of a collectible store that they had in there the bags and boards. Usually, that's sort of more speculator driven
Yeah.
things, or just the popular titles. So Batman, Superman, X-Men, and Spider-Man. That was pretty
Right.
much period.
So wait. You said this was in the supermarket, like not mall, but in the supermarket.
Yes, yeah. So it was
That's the coolest
Ivy.
thing ever.
Yeah, that was also where Ticketmaster was.
Wow. Okay.
So that was nice. And then if you wanted more than just those big titles, out in the grocery store proper was the sort of wire spinner racks,
Okay.
where the issues were just sort of stuck in there, no bag and board.
That's
Uh,
right.
but I could ride my bike to that. And then
Absolutely.
when I got a little older, and got my parents got more comfortable with where I could ride my bike. There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an actual comics brick and mortar store that was a little further away,
Okay.
that I started going to. But I was very fortunate that I had those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of con wise, really it was like St. Louis or Iowa City or Chicago. So
Okay.
basically 2 to 4 or 5 hours drive if I really wanted to go to a con.
Wow.
There were occasional pop-up shows in small little
Right.
DFW halls and
But
things.
to scale for what we typically go to now, you're
Mhm.
traveling in order to get to it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't have a lot there. I was
Mhm.
also big into underground music, which was better in terms of hanging out with people. But
Right.
if I wanted to purchase shit, I had to actually send off self-addressed envelopes to get the catalog,
Right. Right.
and then, or, sometimes well-disclosed cash, money order, right? Not
Hmm.
disclosed, sorry, disguised cash. You know, or maybe if my mom would drive me to a local college town within an hour or so, and I
Right.
would raid their, spend hours in CD stores.
Gotcha. 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 And
So,
I love that you brought up CD stores because that is such a key place of conversation of bygone fan spaces that we didn't think of as fan spaces at the time. But I think, like in nostalgic retrospect, we can actually define them more so as exactly that. But we didn't understand that that's what it was at the time. But keep going. Keep going.
yeah. Well, so actually, but before we let's hang there for a sec,
Hmm.
because I don't want to come to the virtual just yet. Let's
Yep.
talk about the importance of these physical fan spaces, if for no other reason, access to the merch, right?
Yes.
When you did have your comic store,
Hmm.
right? What are some of the memories you have about interacting with other fans in these spaces?
Well, you get the kind of experiential circumstance, right? Did you read dot dot dot? Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And now you have big communications like rooted in fandom, whether you like something, didn't like something, and it pulls not just in terms of the physical merchandise of reading comic books, but comic related material. Did you hear about this video game coming out, this movie coming out, this casting that's happened? They become conversation pieces, and like minds are centered around in these spaces to be able to have those conversations. They are at their very core roots for community building, and that's like the thing that I miss the most is whether it was directly related to comics as a book medium, as a visual medium for multimedia outlets, animation, movies, TV shows, all of that. We had something to talk about. That's what the comic shop specifically brought to me.
Right, because pre-internet, right?
Hmm.
Still
Hmm.
focusing on that. How did you find out about what was good, quote unquote, what wasn't? How do you know what's coming out unless you happen to flipping through a book, you
Right,
see an
right,
ad, right? But
exactly.
that's it,
That's
or
it.
maybe
That's
the catalogs, right? Like the
hmm.
previews,
Hmm.
uh, if you're lucky enough to get Wizard, right?
Right. So
um,
Wizard and previews were the precursor. Sometimes Wizard was a after effect word of mouth source, right? Because as much as I'm a fan of Invincible, who you can clearly see over my shoulder back here, I didn't start reading it until the fourth issue was out, and it had a write up in Wizard. I had seen it, just hadn't taken the chance on it. But after reading the write up on the fourth issue of it in Wizard, I went back to go get it, and that's how I started reading it. So you had both of those options in print media as either a preview or literal after effect, but then there is the word of mouth of individuals. And when you have like curated tastes that are kind of like, hey, this is really cool because dot dot dot, that's a big deal. There was a certain point for me where I only read superhero comics, but through word of mouth I got introduced to Preacher, to 100 Bullets, to and those things kind of opened up my palette for what was an acceptable, reasonable, fun comic book experience.
Yeah, so you're sitting there at the long boxes, right, going through, and what do you know? Sometimes I've been at the long box for 45 minutes or longer.
Don't even know
Uh,
it.
exactly. And then what do? You talk with the person next to you,
Yep.
uh, or the people working at the stores, right? If you're a
Hmm.
regular,
Hmm.
they get to know you. I mean, I love that you talk about community, and we've
Yes.
talked about this in other contexts, but
Hmm.
I mean, the moment when so then we've had a couple different managers at my local store for the
Hmm.
last 6 or 7 years that I've become friendly with. And I remember shopping in there. So I have two good memories, or not too good, many good memories, but but two prominent
Right,
ones.
right.
One is when the this was around the holidays, so right after Thanksgiving. It might have
Mhm.
even been the sort of Black Friday week sale, and I
Gotcha.
was there, and um, someone was coming in, random person, to like, oh, I need to get something for my nephew or whatever. He likes comics,
Mhm.
so I was talking to the owner, just shooting the breeze, and I was going to get some stuff, and then this guy comes in and asks, and the manager goes, okay, I'll work with you in a sec to help you find something, but first I want to make sure and check out this club member, right? And
Mhm.
I never really, I mean, I knew I was a club member, but
Right.
to hear
But to
that, I
hear
was
it, you're like, hey,
like,
stand up
right.
straight a little bit.
Yep. I mean, I may have just my head may have just filled up the room for a
Just a
couple
little
seconds.
bit, just a little bit. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, but it is that, it's that local connection,
Mhm.
and and then he, this person knows what I like.
Mhm.
They will pull things for me even without me asking, and of course there's no pressure to buy.
Right.
Things come in collections that they're like, well, we're just going to get rid of these things. Here's a bunch of old wizards, whatever. Here, I grabbed them for you.
Right.
uh, uh, and then the other one was when I was in there around the same time, just a few years prior.
Mhm.
And I was at the long boxes for about an hour or so. And uh, dude comes in from the streets with a copy of Avengers 1 and
Wow.
is like, how much you give me for this?
Woohoo! To see that. Oh,
And it was so tense. It was like the closest I could think of, what was it? Is it comic book guys? Is it Kevin
comic
Smith?
book man? Yeah.
Yes, right. It was like that, where it was this back and forth. It got really tense. Like I felt my own chest kind of get.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it finally got done, and I want to say that they ended up selling it for about 300, I think.
Wow.
So which is not what the person hoped for, but it was not a
Sure.
that's that type of graded condition,
Yeah,
right? A
yeah.
bag and a board, but
Right.
it clearly had not been the CGC
Sealed
graded.
away, not protected. Yeah, I got you. I got you.
But I got to hold it.
Oh,
Not even in the back. Like, dude,
you actually got the whole actual book.
dude pulled it out of the bag and said, "Here, do you want to hold it?" And I was
You're
like,
like, I want to smell it. Yeah, no. I totally understand that. Totally understand that.
"It's like
I
that
I
Simpsons."
I had a similar experience, and again, you're absolutely right when it comes to both of those things. For me, um, as a comic book fan here in Columbus, I went to Comic Town. I think the first time I was like 16 when I first went, and so in that essence of getting known, Ryan, the store owner, watched me grow up and become a comic book creator.
Mhm.
So, like the moment that I got to put some of my books into his store, he
Mhm.
really was like, I remember when you first started coming in here. Like, I remember when you were just reading books, and now look at like your stuff is on the wall right next to some of the people that you were reading before. Like I want you to know how proud of you I am. And it was like, wow, like that's not even just customer service. That
Mhm.
is true. That's beyond community. That's family building, in my
Mhm.
opinion, because it's an acknowledgement of time. It's an acknowledgement of growth, and evolution of me as a creative. Because obviously, I didn't walk in, day one. I'm gonna make comics. Believe it. Like that wasn't me. I came in, as a consumer, as a customer, and
Mhm.
to grow in his eyes, to not only be a customer, but to then become a creative and then a collaborator. Tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And also to your fandom point, they had um, a guy came in. His name is Bill, and Bill had artwork from the Death of Superman series, and
Ooh.
I got to see that live. Like he was showing it off, and to see any of that brought me into comics was mind blowing. Like this is
Mhm.
stuff that 10-year-old me didn't even understand that this existed in this format in order for me to read it and the format that I received it. So again, like you, touching something of that level, caliber, value, astronomical, but only something you could do in a fandom space like that. And it's one of the key pieces of why that is so important is to be able to experience that
Yeah.
side of the geekdom, to know that there's artisanship that goes into it. There's collectability that goes beyond, oh, I've got this issue. Okay, middle finger to your issue. I've got that page. You're like, wait, what does that mean? It's like the original artwork of the page. I have that. Like, you win. Like, it's almost like a fun hierarchy of geekdom, which clearly resonates with me. As you can see in my office, I have original artwork from page or from books that I've written and published. I've gotten some of the original artwork from the creators that I work with, because that is something special. I can make posters and prints of those images forever and ever, but those are
Right.
unique.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said about the sort of that experiential, that tangibility, right? I mean,
Mhm.
these characters, these stories, these moments, they become important to us.
Very.
Not just what they mean with other people, but even just to ourselves and to our
Mhm.
identities. Stories matter.
Yes.
Um, and I'll make a slight connection here, which may seem strange to people who are not as familiar with the importance of fandom to people. But you think about just historically, right? Like museums.
Mhm.
Um, we have, like in this country, places that are you can go and see like original documents,
Mhm.
very important historical things that make it real, right?
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
just words on a page.
Mhm.
Uh, um, uh, Religion, right? I mean, the Catholic Church for hundreds of years,
Right.
right, have pilgrimage sites
Mhm.
where they have relics of saints and things like that, and
Right.
and there was big business, right? And
Mhm.
you talk about business, right? But there was like people wanted to go to these sites
Right.
because they could, post printing press and literacy, they
Mhm.
could read stories about saints or religious figures.
Right.
Before then, they could hear about it in the pews,
Mhm.
but that's not the
Seeing it is
same as
something different. Yeah. Mhm.
exactly
And
being able to touch or maybe touch the glass between
mhm.
that and something else. Yeah.
And even in that sense of experiential kind of elevation, this doesn't just have to involve traditional geek spaces, like you said. You went religious. We can go sports.
Yep.
If I go to a sports arena and they have memorabilia and whatever, there's a jersey that was once worn by XYZ person. Same concept
Mhm.
of tangibility that kind of like elevates the whole thing. Like, I could watch this on TV forever. But if I'm there, it's an elevated experience. If I can see, the trophies, or this helmet belonged to, it's that same level of reverence that is available in these geek spaces. And I think that's the thing to recognize is geek, as we're talking about it right now, are personalized um, spa- personalized cultures
Mhm.
of significance to us. Like,
Mhm.
that's what geek is. It's whatever the personalized culture of significance is, that's your geek. So whether it's sports, religion, comics, video games, all of it counts as geekdom. So no one should feel left out, like, oh, I don't have a geek. Yes, you do. Yes,
Yeah.
you do. You've got to figure out what it is, whether that's food, crafting, knitting, yarning, whatever. There's a geek in you somewhere.
Right, right. About something.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I love that you use the term culture, and I'm sure colleagues of mine who study culture might, it's a complicated term,
Of
right?
course.
So maybe we'll say culture with a small c, but
Yes.
in my more universal, inclusive worldview,
Mm-hmm.
I my definition of culture largely revolves around, well, what is a series of shared norms, of
Mm-hmm.
customs, of beliefs, of identity,
Yes.
and yes, in all of these spaces as you're talking about, there's some
Have that.
aspect of
Yes,
that,
there is. Yes, there is. It
and
might
there's
not all.
hierarchy.
Yes, yes. Which I think is the most amazing thing is, there's a hierarchy, both in terms of, we'll say, experience as well as execution. If you're
Mhm.
operating at a high level, there's a certain culture that you're supposed to maintain. Your friend that had, or not friend, but the guy that came into the shop with the Avengers, number one, though he had something of high value to the culture, he was not of the hierarchy or the highest hierarchy of it, because the shape that it was in was not in the protected, most valuable essence of the thing. He is a low tier, high item or high culture item place. So, like, when you talk about the complications of it, you're absolutely right. It's super complicated, but there are magical things about that. It's, if, in sports, if I have a sports team jersey, but it has my name on it versus a player, again, higher value to me, lower tier to anyone else. even no matter how special I make that thing, because it's personalized to me, low value to anybody else. Still, I would get, rooted. Oh my God, he's got a personalized jersey. That's amazing. High tier of the culture setting. But again, the value structure is different. It's so fascinating when you look at things like that.
Yeah, yeah, we could do an entire mini series just on these
Easily.
things we've got. Um, I do want to say, because you mentioned growing up in that Comics Town space,
Mhm.
and so it was important to you developmentally. You as a adult Victor, right?
Mhm.
As
Mhm.
producer and not just consumer producer
Yes.
Victor, you see the evolution of younger kids fan development by
Mhm.
being in that space. So can you tell me a little bit about your sort of reactions to seeing,
Ooh,
burgeoning neophyte
yes.
geeks?
No, it's so interesting because we again have that sense of a balance, right? In some places, the culture accessibility is crazy high, higher than I had it, right? Because due to the internet at the very least, you have the opportunity to be exposed to content of a geeky nature at any time of the day possible, right? Like
Mhm,
there isn't like a set time frame, date of availability. You can see it anywhere, anytime, virtually anywhere in the world. And so there's a plus on that side. But then at the same time, that's in a virtual space, not necessarily in the physical space, which means that the tangibility of it, which gives a little bit more ownership of that access, right? So like, and this is such an interesting phenomenon. I had this conversation with my kids. They are more comfortable watching someone play a video game on YouTube than necessarily playing the game themselves.
mhm,
And on a psychological, level, I understand that watching something happening in your brain is almost the same as doing it. But there is something very different from tangibly doing it from
mhm,
watching it. There's an understanding like, you know, I did that. Not even like I can do that. I did that.
mhm,
And there's a certain level of loss that we have where in those physical opportunity spaces, we don't have as many opportunities as we used to have.
mhm.
And the idea of the virtual presence has actually taken something away from us because we haven't balanced out the physical opportunities alongside of it. And one of the things that I think best kind of iterates that is arcades. In an arcade, which have kind of gone away, right? Like in mass, they had a brief resurgence before COVID. I would say like within the first or maybe within 5 years or so before COVID, we started to see arcades have a resurgence, but specifically geared towards grown-ups because they were barcades. So they would
Yes, yeah,
specifically, right? They would be aimed
yeah,
at older, nostalgic centric, spaces. So that you are pulling in a crowd that ideally speaking has, loose money that they can throw around,
yep,
drinks, which will do things, but
oh yeah,
arcades you always had to be in a position of potentially watching someone, right?
mm,
Because they were either 1 or 2 player games. If you were lucky, maybe 4 player games. We're talking about X-Men or Turtles or something like
oh yeah,
that. If you were lucky. But in order for you to get your turn, you had to wait and watch. And
Mhm,
so there was this aspect of watching someone do something with the expectation that when your turn came, you were going to do it. So there was a balance between the two. There was watching to entertain as well as to educate, because sometimes you could learn how to do stuff by watching somebody, and then
yeah,
the expectation was, well, now I want to be able to do it. I saw you do that. I want to be able to do that. There's a connectivity there.
yeah,
Now, with the advent of virtual access points like we have, the necessity of being able to do it is not as high as it used to be.
mhm,
Knowing about it is now higher than being able to do it. Oh, I already heard about that. I
right,
I, I saw a video on that. But did
mhm,
you read it? Did you make it? Did you do it? No, I
mhm.
don't have to because I already saw the thing. That's a very different balance. It's almost an imbalance in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure how much of this is just something of being of our years, of our
Mm-hmm,
generation,
mm-hmm,
right? But so I'm getting ready for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth,
mm-hmm,
and I was have been struggling with the intergrade chapter, beating the boss in that.
Okay.
So I've been grinding and getting frustrated, and it's no longer becoming fun.
Right.
I watched the video on YouTube to see the end, so I knew the story. So I
Hmm.
that's not a connection. But there's still this part of me that's like, yeah, but I would still kind of like to complete it before I play. So we'll
Right.
see if that happens. But yeah, there's it's a complex set of forces going on here.
Right.
I do want to sort of stick on this point though, this issue of virtual contact points and accessibility,
Hmm.
because let's play devil's advocate.
Hmm.
Let's have the naysayers who say that we don't need the brick and mortar stores, or that it's not, of course, it's probably driven by cost effectiveness, right?
Sure.
But they
Sure.
may say, well, if you can get everything you want either digitally, or if you want the analog copy,
Hmm.
Amazon Prime, right,
Yep.
or whatever, or maybe direct ordering. I mean, maybe DC and Marvel still do direct subscriptions. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But if those options exist,
Hmm.
you know, what are the arguments you hear? I guess against the necessity.
So to that point, and what's amazing is you almost just made the exact same argument. You watch the video to see how something
Mhm.
occurs, right? And so when the idea is, well, I have the thing, that should be enough. It's a lack of understanding that how you get the thing becomes
Mhm.
something different, and that argument can only be made by those people that are accustomed to having to go through something in order to get it. If I can just click order and it comes to me, there is no real value to it.
Right.
Whereas every book that you had to ride your bike to go to the grocery store to get, or the
Mhm.
comic shop to get, has a different value to you, and the act of reading it becomes something secondary. That is the secondary value structure, and that's something I try to tell people a lot, that particularly when it comes to brick and mortar stores for comics, um, the content that you're selling is the same no matter where somebody buys it from. So it
Mhm.
can't be about the content that's most important. You as a store can't make the content the most important feature. It has to be your store is the
Mhm.
most important feature. That's the thing that you're actually selling. Is why is anybody going to come to you to get it versus anywhere else? And there are a number of things that can be done in order to make that experience important. And again, that's the pushback for anyone that's like, well, I can just get online, but there's something that you're missing, and I can't even explain to you what it is until you
Uh-huh.
experience it, because what I am experiencing is so personalized but holistic that you can't, like, if I told somebody, like, you wouldn't appreciate a book as much as I do because you didn't ride your bike to go get it, they'd be like, that's stupid. Ride your bike and go get it, and then see how much you appreciate that thing. it,
Right.
it's it is different. It is absolutely different. And I don't know if that's just a human species behavioral thing, or just a hopeful idea that by putting in more work in order to achieve or acquire something,
Mhm.
there is a different value to it. I do got to go back and ask you, for the video game thing, you watch the video of what happens in the narrative afterwards. Did you watch any videos for how to beat the boss?
I did. I watched the
That's
entire, and it didn't work.
that's fair. That's fair.
I'm
But
like, what is this?
what
What
is
are you
this? What
all
is
doing
happening?
that I'm not?
But so to that point, by watching the video of how to do it with the intentionality of, I still want to figure out how to do it, you appreciate the end video that
Mm.
much more, because you're like, well, somebody was able to do that. That's all. Like, there is a disconnect when you don't have to do the work or have no expectation of doing the work in between. There's an absolute disconnect.
Well, so I can tie those two threads together.
Mhm.
This idea of effort.
Mhm.
Um, uh, we do want to justify effort, but we will have to work harder for something generally we appreciate it more, the more that
Right.
we sacrifice
Mhm.
emotionally, tangibly.
Mhm.
And the same is true with products, right?
Yes.
And the more you pay for something, the more, and some of it's buyer's remorse,
Of course.
and
Of course.
it's reinforcing. But yeah, and for me, it's so I think there is a general human tendency, as you noted.
Mhm.
I also feel like there's probably research on this, but there may be some sort of individual difference that is unique to people who like to collect, right? Because there is
Mhm.
different levels of fandom.
Mhm.
So there are qualitative and quantitative differences. Um, so for me, I don't do anything fan wise fair weather.
Okay.
I mean, I do restrict. I do recognize my financial
Sure,
limitations.
sure, sure.
But if it's within that domain,
You're
I
gonna
mean,
go as hard as you can.
I have 1,500 CDs, and I don't know
Wow.
how many digital albums. I have 10 bins of comics in the
Hmm.
basement,
Hmm.
and of course,
Hmm.
it's not well organized. So every time I want to find one issue, I got to go through them
Gotta go
all.
through everything.
But that's its own fun process.
Sure, sure.
Don't even know how many DVDs at this point in time.
Hmm.
And I still want my physical media, right?
Yeah, yeah.
We'll stick with my CDs, right? I can look at most of my CDs and remember about the time in my life when I got them,
Hmm. Hmm.
how I got them,
Hmm.
which some had more emotional resonance than others. My favorite
Hmm.
is there was this German industrial slash electro band called Behind the Scenes,
Okay.
and they had two CDs out for a good chunk of my 20s. One of them was American released,
Hmm.
or American company bought it in a US version.
Hmm.
Um, their first album, though, had no US release.
Okay.
I found a handful of their songs on Napster or whatever service that
Whatever that was that we now know is illegal, we shouldn't have done that. Right, 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 right.
oh, I'm sorry, an entire South Park
Yeah,
episode, all
yeah,
right.
yeah.
But I even then emailed the band because I'm
Wow.
like, I want this CD, right? And they're like, we don't even have copies anymore.
Jeez.
So fast forward, that was probably 2002. Fast forward to 2007. I am now married, graduate school, working on my PhD. Have the opportunity to go visit our good friend and colleague, Dr. Scott
Mhm.
Jordan, who's on sabbatical with his family
Yes,
in Germany.
yes.
So I'm there, and there's some random CD store while we're there, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go in. What the hell? And I go in, and the clerk's like, "What can I help you with?" And I'm like, "Do you happen to have this?" And the person's eyes light up, and they're like, "Yeah, I think I do." And they searched around, and they had it.
Wow.
Yoink!
Give me
That's
that.
mine.
You don't understand. The Holy Grail is real. I have found it.
Right, exactly. He's like, "Well, it's gonna be," and I'm like, "I don't care. Just give it to me."
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Unless you want one of my firstborn kids. That's the
Right.
only thing that I'm like, let me talk to my wife first. But yeah, no, no, I get that. I get that.
But
But
that's story.
see the journey.
Mhm.
Like the journey becomes a part of the experience of the thing, which is it is part of this whole evolution, right? Like being able to um, experience these things is so tied into literal experience versus just having. And I think there's something critical about that difference that we've kind of either lost or haven't articulated very well. Being able to do it, and it's so very interesting that I have this conversation a lot when creatives are arguing about AI, and they're like, "Oh, it's cheating." I'm like, "No, when you make that argument, you are pushing towards those people that are more content with having to be accepting of getting the thing without putting in the work." I said, and here's the thing. Even with AI art, there is an estimation of work. Like you still have to figure out the right things to say in order to get what you want. So what you do is you tell them, hey, when you've achieved that, that feeling that you have gets even better when you don't use the AI. Now you're like, so if I just use this as like a starting point, and then you go, yeah, now from there, keep working so that you can do this, 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 and this. Now you've built an entire rationale that's not using this as an endpoint because just having is not enough. And it's the point that you're trying to make without demonizing an actual progressive step forward in technology that could be very useful for those people that cannot taken the time to build something like that. You got to accept that there are some people that it's not beneficial for them to try to take the time to do this because they'll lose an opportunity right now. And so there is something that they have taken the time to do. Give them this grace on this part, whatever. I'll get off that soapbox. But the idea is give more instruction towards the experiential part versus admonishment over people not having gained the experiential part. I think there's something where you go, as cool as you think that is, there is another level. There is another
Mm.
level. Oh, well, I want to know what that is. Just by doing it, you'll see it. It's very different. It's very different.
So you had mentioned that your local comic shop is closed, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
sort of this idea of having spaces, whether they be local or even the ability to go to physical cons,
mhm.
right? That is a privilege, right? It's a
Yes,
privilege of location, in addition to just having finances, right?
yes.
So for folks who find themselves in a space where they don't have that, you have some particular thoughts on that,
I
right?
do, I do.
So
So I call that a geek desert, right? And I'm borrowing the terminology from economists as well as nutritionists, who really kind of look at as a like a grocery desert where people don't have access to good, whole, clean foods, the inability to make solid meals for themselves, things like that, and kind of having that same sort of breakdown, but in geekdom. I think is just as important. So to be fair and clear, when I say my local comic shop, Comic Town was not located in my neighborhood. I had to drive in order to get to it from where I've lived in the last 20 years.
or
So
have someone drive you
yeah,
if you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
have a license yet, right?
It was definitely a must drive to position, whether I'm riding the bus, whether I'm, like it was not a walkable or reasonable bike ride for me to do under any circumstance. The neighborhood that I live in is in the south side of Columbus, and there is a particular street that crosses east and west, and nowhere south of that street is there a comic shop until you leave and again go into a space where you have to have a vehicle, a motor vehicle, in order to get to have another comic shop. And we have a lot of comic shops here. Like, let me not act like we only have one or two. At our height, I think we had like nine.
Mhm.
And when I say height, I mean within the last like 3 years, we've had like nine comic shops in Columbus. And so the idea that nine comic shops exist in this metropolitan area, but there is a entire side of town, the south side of town, that does not have any of them, creates like a very strong geek desert sort of idea, because you go to almost any other side of town, whether they are affluent, non-affluent, like all of these things, and they still don't have this. There's a desert there, and we're talking, as we joke in the city, we say like the west side is one of the poorest sides of town. They have one of the largest comic shops in the city. Downtown, which again, when it comes to commerce, our downtown is set up with a very 9 to 5 setup to it, right? Like they have living quarters downtown for sure, but it's not really a bustling area post 5 o'clock during the week, or anything like that. People go back to the suburbs. There's a comic shop downtown. So when you look at things in that idea of a place like that actually can only function well for consistent business during traditional business hours for an office, that says something very interesting, that that space has a comic shop, but an entire district of the South Side does not. And we included in that South Side district would be a space called German Village, which is one of our most affluent areas, where it's surrounding a park called Schiller Park. And every house around Schiller Park is valued at over $1 million. Every
Mm.
single last one. And we also have a north and south street called Parsons, that when you're on one side, the German Village side of Schiller Park, you're talking about bare minimum 150 to $200,000 homes. You cross the street and you're talking $40,000 homes, $30,000 homes. Like the level of economy or economics between those two is hugely different, but still no comic shops to serve either of those customer bases on that side of town. Geek desert, without question. Um, but to that end, what I'm trying to do is create virtual spaces for a counter to the geek desert. And again, I understand that like what I just said was there is an experiential part that you want to have, and there's ways that I'm trying to involve both of those. So one
Mm.
of my efforts, based in the neighborhood that I live in, is called Southfield, and it's a quiet little district that was built as a we'll call it a residential area to serve a military installation that's just a couple miles down the road. And it became its own little neighborhood, very secluded on the south side. It's like almost the southernmost tip of the south side of Columbus before you enter another district called Obetz. We are surrounded in different places by industrial complexes. We actually have a chemical plant on one of the border entries to our neighborhood. And there's a long history where it blew up once. There was an orange cloud and just hanging over the neighborhood. It was crazy. It was
Wow.
before I was born, but yeah, it was a big deal. but yeah, so like I'm a third generation of this neighborhood. My mother grew up here. My grandparents moved out here when it was first created, and so this has always been a place and space that I've been familiar with. But they've never had a comic shop to feed them, like not in this area. And that's a very interesting thing to me. So what I've done is I've created a website that you can access through a QR code, and it gives kids, anyone really, but I'm aiming this at kids, the opportunity to read some of the work that I've written and published myself. Now, as I said before, just in a virtual space, there is a lack of doing, right? There's a lack of tangibility, if you will. What I've done to kind of, I don't want to say eliminate that, but to address that is I don't upload everything all at once. I'm doing a page a week. And so
Mm.
what you have to do is you have to wait. And
Mhm.
part of that waiting is the effort. That is part of the whole, oh man, I want to know what this is. And what that gives you is the opportunity to have conversations with other people who are aware of this thing, who are interacting and engaging with this site, to talk about what you've experienced and what you're waiting for. So having that understanding of exactly what the brick and mortar spaces offer and trying to build that into a virtual space has been a rewarding opportunity for me as a creative, because it is bringing together all the things that I understand are necessary. The virtual space, from a cost effective like landscape, is so important. I need that. I don't have the means to open up a comic shop yet. In
Ah.
that's right. In a physical, brick and mortar space. But I do have the means to create what those opportunities would create for others in a virtual space, as long as I'm thinking about that opportunity along the way. And that's where it becomes this bigger form project of, I want to build this community. Here's how I'm doing it, using the same, facets of a brick and mortar that I think are successful for brick and mortars, but just in a virtual space.
Do you have so on the virtual space, do you have like um chat boards or the ability for people to
They can leave
interact
comments.
socially?
Yeah, they can leave comments. They can talk. One of the things that we'll be uploading soon are downloadable pages. So like
Mhm.
games that you can do. And
Mhm.
what I want to do, with a little bit more time, is to make it so that if you do this and you upload your completed board or something like that, if you're one of the first five, then you get something. I'll contact you and you'll get a prize. There is this interactivity for the
Mhm.
whole thing, and that becomes its own bit of experiential effort that has to happen. I got to be the first one, and what that takes me back to is again another geek space that we didn't think about as a geek space at the time, but looking back on it, I'm like, that's exactly what that was. The video store, the video rental
Yeah.
store, was a
Hmm.
geek space.
Yep.
You had limited number of content that you could get, right? Especially with the new releases, they only had a certain number of them, so you had to
Right.
get there on time, early, if you will, in order to make sure that come Friday, which was
Yep.
movie night for a lot of people, come Friday, you were one of the ones that got that movie to be able to watch it when you got home, because it was pizza night or whatever. That was part of it, and it was a family oriented thing. You had sections where, depending on who you are as an individual, you could go to your section, you could find a movie, and you're collectively being represented as a family. What are we into this weekend? Oh, dad's getting this movie, mom's getting this movie, junior's getting this movie, little sis is getting that movie. Okay, that's fun.
Mhm.
Beautiful community building. Sometimes in the best way, sometimes in the worst way. Like, junior gets a movie that's inappropriate and the parents don't know, but the store owner's like, you're not supposed to watch that. And he's like, come on, don't tell them. There's all
Like,
these
this
wonderful
is for
different
when they're
things.
at work, right? I'm gonna bring my friends over. We
I'm
have
gonna
they
bring
have
my
this.
friends over and shh, come on. And it's, again, community. It's what that is. It's absolute community. And it's building all these wonderful things. We've lost video rental stores for the most part. There are pockets, barely pockets of them, smatterings of them in different places. And again, we failed at understanding what the benefit of those places were. They
Mhm.
were replaced with Netflix, which gave us instant access, again, accessibility, but then we didn't have the community aspect of it. We not necessarily, you know, in a race to go see it first or get it first to make sure that we have it. That's why, there are times where stuff is coming out on Netflix and even people are like, hey, have you seen that? Nah, but I'll get to it. I'll get to
Yep.
it. There's a nonchalance. I don't have to care as much. And I think that plays out, even going back further, movie theaters were that for us for a long time. There
Yeah.
was a certain number of seats in a showing. There's only a certain number of showings in a day. Effort created effort, and I realize now when that actually changed for me. When I lost it was when I stopped looking to see movie showing times. When I would just show up at a theater and expect that I'll find whatever movie I want to watch, whenever I want to watch it, that's when I stopped caring. That's when it stopped being a legitimate geek space for me, because I wasn't actively trying to figure out, like, can I make sure that I can see this movie when I want to? I'm not making sure of that.
And I love that point you make there, and I wonder what may change, what ways may slightly change now. And we're kind of I'm kind of confounding this with other things, but we can't always watch it on demand because what happens when there is no physical media? They
Mm-hmm.
want to pull that.
They take
I
it.
still have not seen the last episode of the Willow series because they
Really?
pulled it before I got to watch it. And so like there's like all these MCU shows that my wife and I want to watch. We just haven't had time to do it yet. But she's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we got to watch this before they decide to take it down. Right.
Yes. And that becomes its own sort of thing, is who are they, right? Like
Right.
there's a this overall big brothery they, and we don't necessarily understand the whims that they have for having content for us. Even when Disney used to do that, Disney would put things back in the vault, right? And it would be in the vault for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We had a much more visceral, like, necessary urge to go get whatever content we could, because we knew there was a certain time period where it's not going to be available.
Right.
It's not going to be available. And again, going into where that really changed with the um, disconnect from seeing something in a movie theater and seeing it on home media, I think was in the early 90s. I remember Jurassic Park, I think, was in theaters for like 2 years,
Mm,
and then it came out on VHS,
right.
and that was kind of the breaking point, I think, because there became such an immediacy between movie theater release, home video release. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Jurassic Park was the last one, and it was because Jurassic Park was so popular that it was in theaters for like ever. And when I say theaters, I do also include the dollar theater, the
Mm-hmm.
discount, theater, because it was there for a long time, because it was making money hand
Yes.
over fist, even as a discount piece.
Right.
So yeah, like there's something to that, and it's so very interesting because you're hearing directors exclaim that they want physical media. Christopher Nolan is a big proponent, like, bring physical media back. It's important, because that's how we get directors commentary. And yes, on certain streaming platforms you can still get that. It's not the same, because again, when they can decide, we're not giving that to you anymore, it's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, for even for just curation,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's much more democratic, if you will. And I realize we're also talking about capitalism, but
Yes,
as
yes.
far as well, we need to look no further than the Star Wars original trilogy, and
Yes.
that could be a whole nother tirade.
Because
Um,
again, when we say original, we mean original release, not
mhm.
the updated, tweaked, transformed versions that generations today may have experienced. There's a difference.
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about movies, not movies as a medium,
Mm-hmm.
but movie theater as a location, because
Mm-hmm.
you've done some things there to create community as well, right?
Yes, yes. And
Can
that's
tell
the
us.
other thing. So again, when you have the opportunity to create geek spaces, it's all about looking at what are some of the cornerstones of geekdom, and where can you recreate that for a lesser cost, right? Because cost
Mhm.
is such a big item. And so we recognize that, when you're a creator, right, in today's modern Comic Con setting, the biggest thing that you're actually going up against are celebrities. And it's so interesting. There's so many people that get upset as creators, where they're like, people are coming in and spending all their money with the celebs, and they're not coming at comics, which is the origin of this whole thing. And to that, I always push back and go, this is capitalism. Okay. The thing that brings the most people in has the highest position in the hierarchy. I understand your source, point argument. Oh, comics started this. but comics are the lowest form on the totem pole in terms of value to the general public. That's why we're having this conversation. So to get to meet Captain America is far more important than buying an issue of Captain America. Sorry, that is
Yeah.
the truth. That is the reality that we live in. So to that end, recognizing that truth, and we started this. Friends of mine and I, we started doing this in 2006 with Superman Returns. We started
Mm.
hosting essentially Comic Cons at movie theaters. And so we're
Mm.
setting up in the lobby, much as we would at a Comic Con at Arts Alley, and we still have the same functionality. People are coming in for this celebrity presentation of a superhero, and they're spending money first to get in to see them. But then whatever they might have left, they can come and spend with us. And it adds to the experience of their whole movie going opportunity. It's adding to it, right? And again, that's part of the thing. It's not just that I saw it. When I saw it, these guys were there and I was able to buy this thing. And now I
Mhm.
have something as a part of my experience that other people don't have because you weren't there or they weren't there when you were there.
Mhm.
It adds to the overall bundle of the whole experience. And again, I implore creators all the time to do this. Like, that doesn't have to be something special to me and my friends. That was, when at the height, best height of the MCU, how many different superhero movies were we getting in a year? Three, possibly, more if you're talking about other, companies and their iterations of characters. You're getting like, every 2 months or so, you're getting, an opportunity to showcase your work. That's an opportunity to build community. How many people are going regularly to the movies that will see you multiple times, getting a chance to interact with you, building your fan base? Um, there's so many different opportunities that you can take advantage of that I think are super important. I think you guys do a wonderful thing with that with the normal theater. And again, doesn't require huge scale. It's one screen theater, one
Mhm.
screen. But you guys host film festivals, lectures, all kinds of wonderful things. Again, taking the location of the movie theater and transforming it into a bigger fan space than it originally was intended to be, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's this issue of human social interaction, of eventizing, of building community that's come up a lot, in our conversation here. Not just a community of like-minded folks in that space, but earlier you talked about family community and
Mhm.
neighborhood community,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Intergenerational community. You take your kids to the store and they take their
Mhm.
kids and you take the grandkids, and I think these things are all very much tied together and rooted in human social nature. Um,
Yes. 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 Yes.
and that has value, right? It may not
Mhm.
have monetary value, which is usually
Right.
what makes the decisions, the overhead, but it's there.
We'll call it a social currency,
There we
and I
go.
think
Social.
that's a huge one. And it's I just had that play out in a fun way, um, very like this morning. Um, Juno, my youngest, at 6 years old, loves watching Invader Zim. And this is a show that's far older than her because her 21-year-old brother used to watch it when he was little.
Mhm.
And so there's a thing there, right? So now they have something that they have as a shared bit of social currency that they enjoy. 21 to 6 years old, the gap is covered because of this one thing. Take that a step further, Richard Horvitz, who is the voice of Zim, is someone who I've had the opportunity through my work as a moderator to work with several times on conventions. So now I get to tell my 6-year-old, I actually know Zim. Wait,
Yep.
what? The social currency is now higher, where here is something where, again, you have experiential, right? Her brother watched it, she watched it. The time in between irrelevant because they both have the experience of watching it and enjoying it. But now either one of them has the opportunity to be like, well, my dad actually knows that guy, which is now a hierarchy piece that anybody else that she brings to Zim, right? If they watch it, like, this is amazing, this is hilarious, I love the show. They have one level that they are on the same level of we watched it, we enjoyed it, but then she gets to go, my dad actually knows him. What now? Her social currency is up. It's brilliant the way that it all works.
Yeah, no, I've had similar experiences too with like, the folks that I've been able to interact with from X-Men the animated series and comics and things that this part of my life now is so much fun that way. And
Absolutely.
So my kids, when the younger ones are sort of into that now. The middle, the tweens are like, whatever, Dad, you're
Right, right.
still
You're
embarrassing,
just dad.
cringe. But someday maybe they'll.
Someday it'll turn, and it'll be like a trivia question of, what was the couple that were, the showrunners for the X-Men animated series, and they're like, the Leewalds. Why do I know that? Dad, do you know the Leewalds? And you're like, yeah, yeah, I do that. That's how I. Oh, okay. Like it'll have a place. It'll have a place.
We got a book over there that they signed to you, right? I mean,
Remember, like this,
yep,
literally. Or wait. There's my copy right there. There we go.
right there,
Yeah.
yeah.
Too funny. Too funny.
One idea I had earlier, I'll throw out real quick, because you sort of tease that comics brick and mortar possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see what you do with Vantage in-house, and how in-house like Jay
Becomes
and Bob's Secret
a part of
Stash.
it. Becomes a part of it.
Exactly.
It's funny, if I'm being honest, I am compiling concepts
Mhm.
for what I would want my comic shop to be. And
Mm.
to that end, one of the key ones is I house merchandise, or titles, not by publisher, but
Ah,
by genre.
okay,
Okay.
yeah.
So that when you walk into the shop and I go, what are you into? And they're
Mhm.
like, oh, I don't know what characters. I'm like, no, no, no. Like, what's your favorite movie? Give me your favorite movie genre. And they go, oh, I like sci-fi. Okay, so I would recommend this section. See what books you find that you might like. That's a big one. But the other thing is to pick other aspects of geekdom
Mm.
that ironically have not been as supported by comics, which I think is so very interesting. I don't know that I've ever been to a comic shop that had an arcade, and I cannot figure out
Uh,
why.
mhm.
Cannot figure out why.
Right.
Because if there's an arcade, there's a playability, there's tournaments that you can host, there's all kinds of wonderful things, especially if the games themselves have a comic book lean to them.
Yep.
Oh, you like the X-Men game? Why don't are you reading the books? Like, you check that out. You like the Turtles? They start off as a comic book. What? Like, any
Yep.
of those things.
Mhm.
And then the other aspect is candy. I want to have
Mhm.
an old school candy shop. So we've got like jars of stuff that, if you order a certain number of books, here's a sweets bag that goes along with it. Because part of it is, I want to give you a reason that you're coming to my shop. And
Right.
I don't, as much as I understand that some parents might be like, don't just give my kid candy. But imagine the level of silence that you would have when they have 2 to 3 comic books and a sucker or four that will carry them through the afternoon. I promise you, that level of quiet and peace of mind, parents will be coming to me all the time, all the time. They're like, let's go to the comic shop. Let's go to the comic shop, please. Just take them, entertain them. It'll be a thing.
In my mind, I just had the Willy Wonka Candyman can song.
That's basically it.
Vintage
That's
house
basically it.
can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that'll be the thing. That will absolutely be the thing.
That's cool. That's cool.
Thank you.
This idea of having sort of cross nerd pollination or
Mm-hmm.
collaboration. And when you look at the popular culture cons, right? There's wrestling, there's comics,
Yep.
there's movies, and not everybody there is into all of them. They may be
Right.
into one or two, but there is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I When I teach my comics related courses here, um, I've had an assignment where I require the students to actually go to our brick and mortar store
Mm-hmm.
and have a conversation, buy something new. And the store is very nice to get, like, the Image Firsts or the
Right.
Marvel
Right.
icon. So it's, because people want to start usually with a number one, but I don't
Absolutely.
want them to go in and like pay $50 for a number one. Um, so come in, get something new. Part of that conversation is, well, what do you like?
What do you like?
And most of the students I have in class aren't into superheroes,
Right.
right? So some of them may like the sci-fi and they
Mm-hmm.
find new things. They also have to either, if they're not having a conversation with the store clerk,
Mm-hmm.
um, they have to listen to other people having conversations and reflect
Mm-hmm.
upon the nerd conversation. All right, to get those things that we talked about, like the
That's right.
fly on the wall and say, like, oh, here's community. Okay.
That's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had students who will go back to the store, and some of them aren't even comics fans, right? But like a couple of them, I'm thinking in particular, their essays were like, so I don't really like comics. I'm not gonna buy comics again, but they have pops here, or they have some other type of pop culture accoutrement
Treasure. Yes,
treasure.
yes.
Yeah. And so like one person's like, oh yeah, I love Pokemon cards. Holy crap, they sell Pokemon cards here, right?
Yes,
So
they
yeah,
do.
that's
All of
that's
it
all the
is,
evil scheme.
it's all comic adjacent, right? And I think that's the other thing that that's the other benefit of the physical space. Let me say that outright. When you are in the virtual space, the opportunity to type in what you're looking for exactly is too prevalent where you miss peripheral opportunities for other things. Yes, there are some places and spaces where they say, hey, people that bought this like this, but do we always pay attention to that? Is that always a part of our experience? Very rarely, right? It's usually I want this thing, I'm going to go buy this thing, check out, and I'm gone, waiting for it to arrive. I don't go down and look and go, well, what other things could I buy since I'm here? Physical spaces, because you've already invested in time and energy to get there, you're more
Mm-hmm.
likely to walk around and see what else you can get
Yep.
because you're already there. Virtual spaces, you tend to discount that opportunity. I could always just log back in. I could always do that, from my phone,
Right.
my computer. I go back when I want to. It's easy.
And what if
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking this thing up and I notice, oh, this is kind of neat. They got another pop or another book, but they only have two copies.
Mm,
If I
mm.
decide to come back, they may not have
They may
that
not
next.
have it, so I got to get that right now.
Right.
It's a very different ecosystem of
Mm-hmm.
thinking, commerce, and community building. It's very different. And again, you can only understand that once you do it, because that's the other part. Like, again, you can't even explain it to somebody with any sort of real severity or sincerity unless they've experienced it, because they won't have a real concept of what you're talking about. What do you mean I can't go back? You can't go back. It might not have anymore. Like there's a limited run. Like any number of things could happen where that one time was the one time that you could get it.
Yeah.
That's
Well, that
it.
happened to me yesterday. I didn't realize there was a 3 issue basically Batman Lovecraft. Uh
Oh.
yeah, it's like Batman City of Madness or something like that. And it's the black label. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, what is this? This is the
Mm-hmm.
last one. And the other two, of course, are out there. And the store owner's like, yeah, no, they're completely sold out. He's like, but there will be a trade in pretty
Eventually.
soon. Well, actually, it'll be coming out pretty soon.
Oh,
And I
okay, okay.
right there, I was like, can you pull one for me?
I need it. Put
And
that aside for me right
and
now.
yep, I've got you in the system. You'll get it, right? So, and in many cases, particularly for these sort of unexpected things, I'm not like I need to have the single
Sure,
issues,
sure.
right? Now, if it were like something tied into one of my favorite titles, I might be like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I kind of want that. But here, I want the story,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
give me the trade.
Mm-hmm. And again, the idea of you finding it and having the limitation of getting the rest. You could have stopped right then and there, right? If it was just a one-to-one, you and the work sort of experiential thing, or access thing, that would have been it. Oh, they don't have enough. Okay, I'm done. But instead, due to community, you had a conversation, and that
Mhm.
conversation informed you, hey, there is a trade paperback. It's coming soon, and I can have that for you if you want to make sure you don't miss out on the opportunity again. Community,
Yep.
very different than what you would get from an online sale presentation. It's not the same. Not the
Right.
same.
Yeah.
It's a good one, man. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I do want to specifically say that the importance of geek spaces. I am doing more research to showcase why it's important. How there are vast opportunities that are being missed out on in my local community. And again, the neighborhood that I live in is not super affluent. It's not necessarily super poor, but all the more reason why there are so many opportunities that should be exacerbated and explored better by having access to these particular styles of geek spaces, because there's nothing that actually feeds and informs the community. And when I say that, it's as far as there is a library, a very small branch library that fortunately is going to get like a bigger build over the next couple of years. But kids from the neighborhood go to that library to play games on their computers at the library because they don't have access to do it anywhere else. And that's a very interesting sort of scenario where, okay, so what is that telling us? The idea of an arcade would be phenomenal down here because kids want that. They want the opportunity to play these games. They don't have the opportunities. And so now they have to go to a library, which means that there's limited access, either through the number of machines that they have, the number of people that are already there. And then there's specifically limited time frames that you're allowed to be on at any one given time for any of the students' participation. I think it's like an hour and a half. Once an hour and a half has come up, you have to log off for a certain amount of time before you can log back in to do anything else. So we are seeing the actual like structural benefits of these concepts at play. There are kids that are collecting themselves as groups to go over to this thing to play together, interact together, building community. But we have such a limited resource for them to do that. And that's the thing that I want to impact. They have a limited collection of books in their comic book area. I want to impact that because, again, because it's limited, let's say they don't have anything that you want to read, or everything that they have you've already read. Where is the benefit to you on the community building? Maybe you can make recommendations, but that's about it. There's nothing else to feed you anymore. Because they don't have that churning process of what weekly comic book releases offer. That's something else that could be fixed. Taking a cue from you in particular, Eric, and what you do at the Normal Theater, where this library is in an old middle school. And the middle school itself has been shut down for years, which means that the rest of the building is in disrepair, disuse. Like there's a lot of opportunity. And so what I want to do as my next step as defeating this geek desert in my neighborhood, I know that they are going to build a new library. So that building is about to basically become in ruin. It's not going to have anything done there. And I want to appeal to the neighborhood and specifically the Civic Association to say this should be a community arts center. We do have a rec center, which is great. Recreational sports, things like that, that's fantastic. But let's move into a community arts center because here are the things that are natural facets of the middle school design that we have. There's a gymnasium. Now, because we have a rec center, let's not keep that as a gymnasium. What I suggest we do is we invest in green screen paint and paint the entire room green screen. Why? Because if you have the opportunity to shoot a video and use video effects in that space, you now have a huge movie studio in the neighborhood. What could that offer? You're talking the opportunity for people to learn how to make movies, practice acting, editing. Like there's all kinds of things that can actually come from that, all because you've taken this big space that's not being used at all and gave it this polish to do. There's an auditorium in there. So if we take the auditorium and now that's a movie theater, not only could you make movies, you can now showcase movies. And as you showcase movies, there's an opportunity for commerce, whether that is, you're selling snacks, you're selling entrance into watching these movies. Let's say that you partner with the movie or the library. And so the movies that you're showing are things that you rented from the library. And these are now not for profit opportunities because I could get you in trouble. But you make these nonprofit opportunities. We're going to showcase this movie. We're going to have a talk about what this thing is and why this was popular, why it's prevalent, why it's art. We're building community yet again just by repurposing a space that we had kind of basically charged off as a neighborhood.
Well, and that auditorium, when you're not showing movies, it could be open mic night type things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Huge, right? Imagine if there's a number of cinephiles here in the neighborhood that we didn't know that. There's somebody that's ever wanted to make a movie, but because we're on the south side of Columbus, they never thought that they could. But here we've given them a space and opportunity to go, if you have that right here in your backyard, what would you do with it? Would you support it? Would you show up? Would you be there? That's a very different thing. And considering a school, right? We're talking a school building. How many different rooms are there in this building that you could use, that you could partition out and go, this is an arcade, this is an art studio, this is a culinary arts space. They got a cafeteria.
Yep.
Have you ever learned how to cook this? Do you want to learn how to cook?
Right.
That's something that the rec center is not offering. Why wouldn't we have that there?
Yeah.
So as a cultural arts center, I think there's so much that you can do, dance, music, the whole nine. And I just got to get my local community to be like, you know what? We want that. We absolutely
Yeah.
want that.
Yeah, yeah, and they don't, and people don't know what they don't have, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Until they realize that, oh, we could have this.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I work from home. Why couldn't we actually have like mobile office spaces in that building? And so when I don't want to just be here at my house, I have a place that I can go, and other people that work from home, we can work together and just kind of create, like, again, a little bit of community,
Mhm.
have a space, place, whatever, and then we leave. You know, and the best part about it is about a year ago, a facility that was meant for temporary housing for homeless people was
Mhm.
built in my neighborhood. My neighborhood had a huge problem with it because this is a housing district, right? We're not talking apartments, we're talking a housing district. And they're essentially building an apartment at the entrance of the neighborhood for formerly homeless individuals.
Mhm.
And yes, there is a stigma. We understand that. But
Right.
this new space, right? This cultural arts center would be an opportunity for employment for them.
Yep.
You know, we could hire them and say, okay, you're part of the cleaning staff. And you also get to take part in some of the things. Maybe we could find out that they actually have some cultural arts interests that they get to now flourish with and have an opportunity to turn their lives around because our neighborhood offers this thing, which now means that if somebody comes to that facility that the neighborhood was kind of like, we don't really want, we as a community get to
Mhm.
help prop you up, put you on your feet, and now you get to come and become a successful contributing
Yeah.
member of society.
Yeah. So you have your computer labs, right? If you have, I think it's my wife, one of her previous jobs, she worked at a homeless shelter,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And then worked with a lot of unhoused people. And it's very much, she will tell stories about some of the different experiences that these folks have when many of them, maybe they were formerly incarcerated, right? They get
mm-hmm.
out. What do you got to do now? Okay, well, I
Yep.
got to get a job. I got to have a computer to be able to do that, right? Type up a resume, these types of things. And I know that a lot of local libraries, municipal libraries, and things
Mm-hmm.
will sort of fill that niche in some
Right,
ways.
right,
But what if the library you can't your library doesn't, or what if there isn't a
right.
library? And I'm not sure what's near your community center, but yeah, I think a lot of the ways that people are trying to rethink library spaces,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
especially as, again, someone who's analog, but as analog is going away,
Right.
for better or for worse,
Mm-hmm.
uh, what are things that these community building spaces can
Mm-hmm.
be,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Huge
whole other
opportunities.
yep, yeah, whole other podcast we could have there, man.
It's so true. It's so true. But again, of course, you know, as a community venture, one of the things that I would love to have is just a little nook somewhere in that building where I can sell comics to kids and, you know, create a space where not only are they, you know, selling comics, but they get to make comics and, you know, have this whole culture of geekdom that they get to support and supports them all the time.
And that brings us back to kind of where we started, right? That the people we all suffer when we're in geek deserts, when we
That's
don't
right.
have whatever we're fan about, if we don't have the opportunities physically or virtually, but
Yep.
especially physically, because all of these things involve resources, right? You have
Mhm.
to have the ability, even virtually, to be able to access that. And
That's
who
true.
gets hurt the most? It's the young people,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Those
So
that are too young to know or too poor to ask. And that's one of the things that, again, the desert is the worst for. And so being somebody who is closer on the line of being totally liquid with my geekdom, I want to make sure that I'm bringing that thirst quenching opportunity to my neighborhood.
no, indeed, young Victor, young Eric, that's what we needed, and
We
we were
needed it, yes.
yes, yeah,
And just because we don't suffer it now doesn't mean that there aren't other people suffering it. So if we can fix it because we've been there, then we should.
yes. Excellent. Yeah, paying it forward. So, well,
Absolutely.
Victor, as always, I love having these chats.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to having more with you in the future. Anything you want to leave the audience with? Tell them where they can find you.
Absolutely. You guys can find me at Vantage In House on all forms of social media. I've launched a new podcast with my buddy Bill. It's called Into the Chatterverse. If you look us up on YouTube, we've got a few episodes out right now where we are just talking about all things pop culture and adding our 2 cents on the conversation. Definitely have new books that are coming out. If you get a chance and you want to create comics yourself, definitely check out You Create Comics. That's the letter U, CRE, the number 8comics.com, which is going to get a major facelift because the route of what You Create Comics is going to change. Again, with the mind of these opportunities that I want to create, I'm opening the doors to a lot of things that I had kept secret for a long time for propriety's sake, and realize now, like, no, let's start giving stuff away because it's going to impact more people.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you.
As always.